Welcome back, everyone. So, we have these things that show up suddenly without warning, and just as quickly as they show up, they disappear. What's strange is that this happens all over the world, across completely different cultures, and the descriptions follow the same patterns. The names change, the locations change, but behavior doesn't. And that is something that makes this feel less like a bunch of unrelated creatures and more like a single phenomenon showing itself in different forms, depending on where and who is doing the witnessing. When people hear the word cryptid, they usually picture one specific thing at first: Bigfoot, some massive hairy humanoid, Dogman, the upright wolf stalking rural roads. Mothman shows up as a winged humanoid, usually tied to disasters. Crawlers, the pale underground beings that move in ways that don't look human at all. Shadow people aren't even physical, just dark figures seen out of the corner of your eye. Now, on the surface, none of these sound related, right? Different names, different shapes, completely different stories. But when you slow down and really look at how they appear, how they interact, and how encounters unfold, they all start behaving the same way. And that's where things get really uncomfortable. One of the strangest things that comes up again and again in cryptid encounters is how they appear. There's rarely a buildup. Now think about this. People aren't watching something approach from a distance the way you would with an animal. Instead, it's there in a second, like it stepped into the scene, and then it's gone just as fast. Witnesses talk about these things vanishing instantly, leaving no clear tracks, no broken bush, no obvious ways they could have escaped. Sometimes they seem to fade out, blink away, or they step behind a tree or structure and never reappear. That's not how wildlife works. And we all understand enough about physics and what our own eyes can see. Bigfoot is seen crossing a trail and then disappears the moment it reaches the tree line, even though there's nowhere big enough for it to hide. Dogman sightings sometimes end mid-chase, with the creature sprinting towards someone and then suddenly gone, as if it hit an invisible wall. Mothman is reported hovering or flying, only to vanish in midair without changing direction or altitude. Crawlers are seen retreating into darkness that shouldn't even be there, slipping into shadows that seem to open up and swallow them. When you line these stories up, the details are different, but the pattern is the same. Coincidence? Another pattern that doesn't get talked about enough is who these encounters actually happen to. It's rarely a group of people standing together in broad daylight. Most witnesses are alone or isolated in some way, even if other people are nearby. Many of them are already under stress. They're exhausted, grieving, or going through something in their personal lives. And the locations matter too. These encounters tend to happen in between places. Long stretches of road, forest edges, bridges, backyards that are at the edge of wilderness, or quiet rural areas where civilization thins out. A lot of people later realize they were also at a turning point in life, whether that was moving, losing someone, starting over, or feeling disconnected from the world around them. That's why it starts to feel intentional rather than random. Cryptids don't seem to just wander into view by accident. They show up at thresholds, physical ones and psychological ones. Roadside encounters where people are traveling between places, often late at night, half on autopilot, when something suddenly appears in the headlights. Hunters, truckers, night workers, they are the ones who report these experiences far more often than average, probably because they spend time in those quiet, liminal hours when most people aren't around. And then there are the kids and the teenagers who seem to notice things adults dismiss or never see at all. When you put all of that together, it starts to look less like chance and more like a pattern built around the state someone is in when the encounter happens. Something else that keeps showing up across almost every type of cryptid encounter is the way people feel before anything ever happens. Witnesses describe a sudden wave of terror that hits out of nowhere, like their body knows something is wrong before their eyes do. There's a strong sense of being watched, even when the area looks completely empty. People freeze in place or feel locked into that fight or flight mode where thinking clearly just shuts down. In a lot of cases, there are missing moments too. Time gaps, fuzzy memories, or entire chunks of the experience that don't come back until much later, if they ever do. So why does the fear come first? If this were just an animal encounter, the fear should follow what you see, right? Not lead it. What makes this even stranger is how closely this matches other experiences people don't usually connect to cryptids at all. Sleep paralysis entities bring the same dread and paralysis. Shadow beings come with that same feeling of presence before form. Alien abduction accounts describe identical time loss and that overwhelming fear. When you line those experiences up, the emotional and psychological fingerprints are nearly identical. Another detail that keeps surfacing in these encounters is that communication seems to happen without a single word being spoken. People feel understood by them. Witnesses often say things like, "It knew I was there," or "It wanted me to leave," even though nothing was said out loud. Some describe a sense of curiosity coming from the entity, like they were being examined or evaluated. Others mention an overwhelming feeling that whatever they encountered was ancient, intelligent, or fully aware of the situation. Bigfoot encounters are full of stories about so-called mind speak, where people receive clear thoughts or warnings without hearing a sound. Dogman reports describe intimidation displays that feel deliberate and controlled, as if the fear is the message. Crawlers watching silently from a distance, not attacking, just studying. And with Mothman, it's not even direct interaction. The presence seems to just line up with major disasters, like it was there to signal something. Animals communicate through movement, sound, and behavior. These things seem to communicate on a mental level, and that difference changes everything. What makes all of this even harder to brush off is how consistent these entities are across cultures that had no contact with each other. Bigfoot isn't just a North American idea. It shows up as the Yeti in the Himalayas, the Yowie in Australia, and the Almas in Central Asia. Dogman doesn't stop at modern sightings either. History is filled with werewolves, the dog-headed men written about by early explorers and scholars. Crawlers line up almost perfectly with old stories of ghouls, the jinn, the pale humanoid beings said to live on the edges of human society, the rake. The Mothman fits right into much older traditions of harbingers, watchers, or angels of death entities that appear before tragedy, not after. The important thing is to notice that these stories didn't spread through movies, social media, or television. Many of them were recorded centuries ago, long before mass communication existed. Cultures separated by oceans, languages, and belief systems were describing the same types of beings, with the same behaviors and the same effects on witnesses. The names changed, the symbolism shifted, but the core descriptions are consistent. So maybe it's a question of whether people were inventing creatures or encountering the same thing and trying to explain it in the only language they had. So folks, what you have to understand here is this: governments and institutions have shown interest in what they sometimes refer to as unidentified biological entities, even if that interest never turns into public discussion. And what they have done is they have orchestrated everything in a certain way to get you and I to look at these cryptids as separate mysteries. So instead of looking at the phenomenon as a whole, everything gets neatly divided into categories. Bigfoot here, dogmen there, UFOs somewhere else, shadow entities in another box entirely. Each one becomes its own isolated mystery, you see? But when you separate the stories like that, patterns disappear. If you fragment the story enough, no one can see the whole picture. Do you see? So what this comes down to is not what these things look like, but what they actually are. And the honest answer is that no one has a clean explanation, right? Which might be why the possibilities are more interesting than any hard conclusion. Interdimensional entities slipping between layers of reality, consciousness-based phenomena, something that interacts with the human mind as much as the physical world, which would explain why perception, emotion, and awareness play such a big role in encounters. There's also the ancient idea of watchers, beings that have just always been there, observing rather than fully participating, occasionally crossing a line they're not supposed to cross. Another way to look at it is that these encounters might be glimpses of a shadow ecosystem, something overlapping our world but not fully part of it. That would make cryptid sightings less like animal encounters and more like moments when the boundary thins. Some people compare this to simulation glitches, where the system briefly fails to hide what's running underneath. Others connect it to the biblical watchers, the Nephilim, or evil spirits, demons. Demons taking possession over manufactured bodies, perhaps. When you put all of that together, it starts to feel like reality itself isn't as stable or as solid as we're taught to believe. And cryptids may be one of the ways that instability leaks through. Maybe cryptids aren't rare creatures hiding from us. Maybe there's something that only appears when we're not supposed to see them. And if that's true, what does that say about reality? Anyway, that's going to be all for now, and there is more to come. Please click the thumbs up button and like this video for me on your way out. Leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Let me know what you think. Everyone have a great day, and until next time, stay awake, stay aware, stay safe, and I'll talk to you all soon.